Hi, and welcome to the Secret Sauce of Selling podcast, the ultimate guide and sales gym to unlocking the secrets of successful selling. I'm your host, James Abraham, and I'm excited to be here with you today to share insights, tactics, and strategies to help you take your sales performance and sales leadership game to the next level. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. This week, we've got Jeff Borovitz from Sandler. Jeff, how are you doing?
Doing great, James. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome to the show, my friend. Why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Sure, happy to. My name is Jeff Borovitz. I'm based out of San Francisco, California, in the United States. I have been a salesperson ever since, I guess 6 years old in Little League when I had to sell the $1 candy bars. And professionally, I've been a quota-carrying salesperson my whole career, and started doing sales training back in the 90s with Dale Carnegie Sales. And I've worked with Dale Carnegie Sales, spin selling, Miller Hyman, Challenger, and Sandler, and with Sandler being my favorite.
Awesome. Well, today's topic is the money discussion and how salespeople either fail or win that point in the process. So tell me more about that topic and why that topic is important these days.
Yeah, I think that the topic's always important. It's probably more important now with an uncertain economy. We just came out of 2.5 years of people being flush with cash, and the cash flowing maybe more freely than it should have. And people got used to just naming a price and having people go, oh, okay, I'll buy it. And that's not how it should work. People forget that the money discussion is part of the discovery process. And as such, it's a question-based technique. It's not you tell somebody what it's going to cost and then negotiate, and then that's a starting point for negotiation. The money discussion should be a one-way discussion from the client to you as a salesperson. It's not bi-directional. This isn't where you find out, where you tell them what it's going to cost. It's where you find out from them how much they have to spend, that they are what I'll say is willing, able, and comfortable spending. And that may by the way, James, it's okay if that disqualifies the client. They may disqualify themselves. And if that's the case, we as salespeople should be 100% okay with that. And too many people try to, when they get a number that's too low, they try to talk the number up. Instead of ask questions to get the client to bring up the number. And I think that's the secret sauce in the budget discussion. And then as we go through today, I've got 6 magic or secret sauce questions that we can give everybody to ask in the budget discussion.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times we find that professionals, salespeople, business owners, entrepreneurs, anyone in a revenue growth position, they use that budget conversation as an anchor for negotiation. They don't realize they're doing it. It's more about flexing muscles, planting their anchor, and just hoping that if they, a number pops out, then, something miraculous will happen. In most cases, they hit a brick wall. So tell us more about your process when it comes to that budget discussion.
Well, I think the first question in the budget discussion always has to be the same question. You need to find out if this project is a budgeted project. If you're doing B2B sales, first thing you need to find out is this project budgeted? And if it is, that gives you a hint as to where the client's at. If it's not, it also gives you a hint as to where the client may be at. And so that first question, if it comes back as, hey, is this a budgeted project? Yes. Well, okay, great. How much money have you allocated in the budget towards this solution? And James, honestly, I don't even care what the answer to the question is. Because my next question is irrelevant to their answer. If I know my solution's $500,000 and they tell me they got $1 million budgeted, or if I know my solution's $500,000, they tell me I got $100,000 budgeted, it doesn't change my next question. My next question, this question number 2, is how did you arrive at that amount? I want to understand. I want them to tell me a story about how they came to the amount that they came to, whether it was $1 million or $100,000 or $1,000. And because as it's amazing what happens when we ask people to tell us stories. First of all, as a race, we are a storytelling people. We've been telling stories for centuries. Before there was written language, stories were passed down. And so when people start to tell a story, they start to recite from memory. And they are no longer trying to couch things or hide things as much as they do when you ask them a question. And so by getting them to tell a story, you usually get more information. So the first, that next follow-up question is, how did you arrive at that amount? And they're going to tell you a story that lets you know how they came to that amount, and probably a whole lot more.
Yeah, I love it. What's question number 3?
Question number 3 comes very simple. It's, again, doesn't matter if the number's high or low they gave you. By the way, it's almost always low. Is question number 3 is, if that turns out not to be enough to get everything you're looking for, where would we find the rest? And the key, the magic part or secret sauce part of that question is, where would we find the rest? When we phrase it as we, the budget discussion can often be looked at like a big, James, have you ever participated in a tug of war? You know, you got a big group of people pulling on one side of the rope with another big group of people pulling on the other side of the rope. The budget discussion sometimes can feel like a tug of war, right? We're pulling for more money, they're pulling for less money. When we say, where would we find the rest? We have dropped one side of the rope, and we've, at least mentally, for them, we are now pulling on the same side of the rope. It's collaborative. And I want to be very clear here. When I say we, it's a figurative we. All right. I don't want any salesperson that's listening to this podcast to ever say, oh, well, Jeff from San Francisco said I could lower my price. No. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, we're using the psychology of saying where would we find more money, to let them tell you where they will find more money. Again, they're going to give you a way, and then and then a follow-up question is going to be, have you ever done that before? Well, we can go back and ask for more money from our VP. Oh, wow. Have you ever had to do that before? Can you tell me more about that? If they have, then we're going to say, can you tell me more about that? And they're going to tell us a story. And the more, the key to the budget discussion is, the more we get them talking, the better off we will be. Because our goal is to get information from them, not to give them dollar information here. The investment budget discussion is part of the discovery process. It is not part. We don't give a price until we start to present. And we have to be very careful here, because a lot of salespeople, one of the big mistakes they make is they suffer from PPS, premature presentation syndrome, where they start to present too early. And one of the key things they start to present too early, remarkably, is the price.
Yeah. Yeah. They got, I call it threshold incompetence. They look and see, oh, I'm going to test the buyer. I'm going to test the buyer. I mean, every time you give them a number, they're going to flinch.
Yes.
Where they learn the flinch from? They learned it from someone else that gave them the flinch once upon a time, and so on and so on. And all right, so what happens after that part?
Yeah. So after that part, we understand how they arrived at the number. Then we're going to ask the quality. Now, if the number, I know the number's low, and by the way, it's almost always low, right? I count in my sales career, James, I could probably count on one hand the number of times that a buyer gave me a budget that was more than I actually needed. Right. And I've done thousands and thousands of sales transactions, and I like less than 5 times it's happened. And so then we want to ask that next secret sauce question, which is, so I don't want to waste your time. How much, at what number does this not make any sense for us to even show you a solution? And with my software clients, I tell them to say this exactly. Hey, we've got some super talented engineers that work for us, and they can out design anybody's budget. So you tell me, what number does it not, should I go back to my engineering team with and tell them, hey, don't go above this number, because if we go above this number, it's an absolute no. And get them to give us that number. And so ask them, what's that top end number that which you don't even want to see the presentation? Right? And then after that question, we're gonna test it. Right? So just to be clear, James, if it's above $1 million, you don't even want to see the presentation. Is that right? And guess what, James? What do they almost always say?
Well, I'm not sure. Let's see.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They never say, oh, yeah, Jeff, I don't want to see it above $1 million. They almost never say that, right? Yeah. They're gonna say, no, I still want to see it. I still want to see it. And that's when it allows us to ask the next question, next secret sauce question, which is, I'm confused. Why would you want to see something that's more than you can afford? And now I love this question, James, because it puts the client in the position of having to justify, defend, and explain to you why you should show them something that's more expensive than what they asked for. Do you see how this kind of just leads that way? And so now think about it. You've got a client who gave you a budget of $1 million, and you know that's not enough. And you ask them, well, would you want to see something over? Should you only want to see it if it's over that? Well, no, I do. Well, I'm confused. Why would you want to see something that's more than you just told me you could afford? And now they're explaining to you why you should present to them something that's more money than they asked for. Who's selling who now? You've completely flipped the script on them, and now they're convincing you to show them something that's more. And then we're going to follow that up with the question of, well, James, okay, if it's over $1 million, you still want to see it. At what number do you not want to see the presentation? And now they're going to give you a number, because they can't say, I don't know. Right? And they're going to give you a number. And when you get that number, you verify it by asking again. So just to be clear, if it goes over 1.25 million, we should not even bother. Yeah, that's right. Okay. What did I just get, James?
You got a range.
I got a top end budget, right? Does that necessarily mean they're going to spend 1.25 million? No. But it means that they at least are comfortable that they might be able to spend 1.25 million. Right? And so for me, that's the secret sauce of these magic budget questions is that they're like Lego blocks. You ever play with Legos? Legos build one on top of the other. These magic budget questions build one on top of the other. And by the way, we're staying within the Sandler principle of letting the client talk at least 70% of the time and us talking at a maximum of 30% of the time, even in the budget step, which is, by the way, where most salespeople completely screw it up and flip it, and they're talking 70% or more. And we're letting the client do most of the talking in the budget in the budget step. And the more they talk, the higher their budget usually goes. Or they're more inflexible, their budget's revealed to be, and you might be able to disqualify them. Either way, as a salesperson, you win.
Yeah. So let's talk about mindset for a second.
Yeah.
The technique's awesome. Question is, will people do it?
No.
Well, the good ones will, the awesome ones will, right?
Yeah.
And so let's talk a little bit about why sales professionals cultivate a mindset of neediness, a mindset of spineless, um, uh, 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 mouth blabbering, number giving, uh, incompetence when it comes to the budget step. And by the way, I just described that as most sales professionals tell me what they're experiencing when they hit that point.
Yeah. James, back in 2019, I did a talk at a very large sales conference here in the States, and I had 200 people in the room. I called 10 people up at random, and they were all sales leaders. And I asked each one of them what color underwear they were wearing. Right down the line with the microphone, everybody said what color underwear they were wearing. I asked them how much money they made. Not one of the 10 would talk about it in front of the group. People will talk about their underwear before they talk about money. And it's all because of mindset. And I think it starts at childhood when we're given all these negative money messages. Those of you listening to this out there, think about this. When you were a kid, did you ever ask your mom and dad how much money they made? What was the answer mom and dad gave you? I'll bet you it will, for most of you, it was not a dollar amount. It was some other kind of answer. James, what did your mom and dad tell you when you asked them how much money they made?
Lots of money, or not enough, or something of that nature.
And James, you've got kids, right?
Yep.
And when your kids ask you, do you tell them?
Well, to be honest, so as a standard trainer, I'm very open about the numbers.
Yeah. And I am too with my kids. My kids have known that amount of money, and we tell them it's private. It's not something we discuss outside the family, but here's the amount. Because one of the things that I've worked very hard, we have always, society-wise, we've always been raised that money is about looking at money from a position of scarcity. I've worked very hard to help my kids look at money as a position of abundance. That money, and the key that I tell them all the time, and everybody that listens to this should write this next line down. Money is a renewable resource. Every one of us gets more money all the time. We can always make more money. That doesn't mean we should spend it frivolously or stupidly. But if you look at money as a renewable resource, does it change how you think about money a little bit? I think it does. And you can still be careful with how you spend money, but you can look at it. You can look at it as a renewable resource, and it makes it easier to do. Now, the second thing that I want the listeners to think about here is you can start this discussion in the budget step by giving the client by putting the decision to talk about money in the client's hands. You could tell them, hey, listen, it's time for us to talk about investment. There are 3 parts of investment for me in my business. In my business, it's really about money, time, and resources. And about how much money you have to spend, about how much time you're willing to put towards the project, and what resources are you willing to dedicate towards the project. Which one, Mr. Client, Mrs. Client, would you like to talk about first? Let them choose. Guess what they almost always choose, James? They almost always choose money, right? They almost always choose money. And now you're talking about money because they chose it. And if they want to talk about time or resources first, awesome, fantastic. Have the discussion and then come back and say, okay, we talked about resources. Now it leaves us with money and time. Which one do you want to talk about next?
Yeah, I agree. Another thing is, I find it a crime not to tie compelling pain, quantified pain, to this discussion. And always, and I love that shift you just mentioned, time, money, and resources. And if you think about it, I think a lot of sellers, they shy away from the real pain conversation, quantifying it, articulating it, addressing it, getting an emotional hook on that. making sure that this is for the right reasons. And a lot of times I think that's because they have a money concept problem. They don't want to talk about it, right? And so, and they're like, oh, but James, what will happen if they'll get upset at me? Why am I asking the question? I'll say, well, the reverse on that, or the response to that would be, well, Mr. Prospect, if you're not losing money, why the hell would you want to work with me? What's the point?
Right. Yeah, no, I listen, you could do everything right in the budget step. If you don't have compelling pain, with pain tied to revenue, pain tied to return, some kind of pain tied to dollars, it makes your budget discussion 100 times harder. And the simple truth of the matter is, I always find, James, that the more pain I get that I'm able to tie to dollars, the easier the budget discussion becomes. Now, I still need to do the secret sauce budget questions, right, to test and make sure that we're developing a solution that's within their range. Because, and by the way, because don't just assume, if somebody has
never assume.
Yeah, never assume.
You said don't just assume, it's never assume.
Never assume, right? Never assume, well, hey, they have $1 million problem and I've got $100,000 solution. Well, you know what? You don't know that they're willing to spend $100,000 to solve that $1 million problem. You need to find out, and that's what the budget discussion's for. Finding out it's $1 million problem is what the pain discussion's for. And I have a client of mine who's a large alternative energy client, and they're trying to sell to a big global $70 billion company. And their solution will save this $70 billion company about $4 million a year. And their solution is it's going to save them $4 million a year for the next 10 years, which is about $40 million. Their solution over that time will cost that company about $5 million. Seems like a no-brainer, right? Spend $5 million to save $40 million? I'd do it. Would you?
I have to find the $5 million first.
Yeah, right. If you've had to find, their problem is that for this company at $70 billion, there's no pain. $40 million is a rounding error on their P&L. And so there's not enough pain for them to take action. They're not willing and able. Well, they're able, but they're not willing or comfortable. That's why I say willing, able, and comfortable. They're not willing or comfortable to spend the money, time, and resources on something that's a rounding error. So that's why you have to go back and make sure that the pain you found is enough money for them to take action on. Because because you have a good solution with a good ROI doesn't necessarily mean they're going to take action on it. You have to make sure that that amount of money is enough, that level of pain is enough that they're willing to take action.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Behavior.
Yeah. Got to do the behavior. The mindset's super, super important. But man, I'll tell you what, it's a funny thing. If you'll do the behaviors, and the mindset will catch up. If you wait to have the mindset first, you'll never, ever do the behaviors.
Yeah. So just keep at it. Make sure you're doing your budget tip on every freaking call. Don't miss out.
Every call. Yeah. Every call. Follow your process. Every single call. Follow your process.
Yeah. I say this, they say this good saying, he with the gold has the power, and like, we've got the goal. You got the salespeople's got the solution to the problem. Prospects got money. Money's, and you mentioned it's an unlimited resource. You can get money from anyone. It's a commodity. Salesperson, your solution is technique. Your solution is unique, and so they need you more than you need them.
Yep. And too often salespeople go out and act the opposite of that.
Exactly. All right, awesome. Well, I want to take a moment and just give a shout out to our sponsors, Novacy. Novacy unlock behavioral insights from virtual meetings to close more business and more deals. The AI for sales intelligence records, analyzes, and provides insights in body language, verbal communication, analysis, analytics, behaviors, and emotions. So check out Novacy, novacy.io. So Jeff, it's the point where I ask you the question, what is your secret sauce for selling?
My secret sauce for selling is to always have a clear, defined future. I never end a call without having a clear, defined future. That's a yes, it's a no, or it's a next scheduled step that's calendared and accepted in people's diaries. And if you'll do that as a salesperson, you'll be ahead of 90% of the salespeople out there. I can never believe, I'm always just flummoxed by the fact that I'll talk to a salesperson. Oh yeah, I had a great sales call. What's the next step? Yeah, we're going to touch base in a month. Oh, was that on the calendar? No. Well, if you don't have
no, the month. Wait. Before anything, the month is what terrifies me. I mean, a
depends
month.
on your selling cycle, but yes, right. It depends on your
Even
selling
the
cycle.
selling cycle, I have this rule. They say time kills deals, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
I say time kills memory. That's
Yeah.
why time kills deals, because it's
That's
critical.
right.
It kills memory. I mean, I don't remember what happened last week. I mean, a month. And how are they locking that in? I love that. That's an interesting and important point. I appreciate that very much. Jeff?
Yeah, I tell people all the time to make sure you have that. Everybody carries one of these mobile devices with them, and every one of them has a calendar on it. And before you get off the phone with somebody, before you get off a Zoom with somebody, before you get out of somebody's office, get that next step calendared and accepted, because what's in the calendar tends to happen.
Absolutely. I love it. Jeff, are you listening to anything interesting these days? Any books, any movies? I mean, anything. I got someone who had suggested a play, others suggested movies. I mean, anything that you believe would be great for sales professionals, business leaders, business owners to follow or to get exposure.
I just finished reading The Working Genius by Patrick Lencioni. It's a great book for any kind of business leader or manager to understand. I think as business leaders and managers, sometimes we make the mistake of thinking we have to be great at everything, when in reality, what we have to do is figure out what our strengths are and then hire people to fill the gaps. And that's what Working Genius is all about. So if you get a chance to pick that one up, it's a good read.
That's awesome. How can listeners and viewers reach out to you and find you?
Easiest way is my website, which is borovitz.sandler.com. Or they could just email me at jeff.borovitz@sandler.com.
Awesome. Jeff, thank you so much. I appreciate your insights. Love talking about money. Love talking about the budget step. Super important, relevant. So I appreciate your wisdom.
Thanks so much, James.
To the listeners and viewers, until next time, no guts, no gain. Good selling, and whatever you do, make sure you do your budget step.